but the founders may have a little more experience or a little more know-how of the problem that they're solving or something like that. But at that stage, there really is no customer. They may be a prototype of a product, so at least we can see, or a model or something, but it's still very, very early. Those rounds are typically anywhere from 500K to maybe up to $1 million, but roughly. And then we invest in what we call seed. And seed for us is, okay, there's a product, and at least there is 1 or 2 customers that we could talk to. If you're in consumer, there's maybe a few hundred or 1,000 users, so very small. But we can see at that point that, hey, the product is great and people really want to use it, right? So this is very, and then the job that we do once we invest in seed is to help them build, what we call the growth engine. So getting them ready to go to a Series A VC. And when you go to a Series A VC, you're supposed to be able to say something like, hey, if you give me $10 million, I will be able to 5x our revenue, and I know exactly how to do it, right? That's the stage where we want to get our companies to. And there's exceptions. We have companies that are biotech companies, or companies that are chip companies, and those companies have different milestones than a software company or a fintech company that are fit more in the first category that I just defined. For the bio and more deeper tech companies, it's all about getting through risks, right? So you use your first money to basically prove something, and the next money to prove a little more. So you make it less risky for the people that may have bigger checks. I don't know if that answers your question, David, or you can.
No, that is an excellent answer.
Well, good.
So Mar, one of the things that, hi, I'm Brooke. Our company is called Bench K-12, and we are the human capital management system for K-12 education, starting with the substitute teacher module. One of the things that we're kind of struggling with in this kind of pre-seed space is when we're kind of putting together our deck for potential investors, kind of those product slides, we've been trying to figure out, like, what do we really present there? Is it more of like a product roadmap of kind of where we want to go, or kind of where we're at right now? Like, what's the most helpful for you to see from a pre-seed stage? Because a lot of the examples are people who are further along, right?
Sure.
So it's been hard for us.
No, that's a good question. It's a really good question. I think this is like my superpower, figuring out how to do this decks. Sadly, after my PhD, now I'm like doing decks. But it really depends on your audience, right? So if you're going to talk to an institutional investor, somebody that has a venture firm, so any of us that were in the panel, I think all of us are looking at, is this a big market? Is this a big market? So it's a little counterintuitive, but I encourage all these founders at the very early stage to really be super knowledgeable about the market, right? Like, what are the holes in the market where I could build a giant company? And I think this is, again, counterintuitive, because we're told just focus on traction and hustle and make sure you do something. But you can't, it doesn't matter for the big guy, the big firms, or the firms that have, that are institutional. They just want to be like, is this going to be a big company? So the first thing is study your market and figure out what that is. It should be big, right? And then you have to have a very, very, very focused, this is very challenging, but very focused strategy for getting into that market, right? So sometimes it's counterintuitive, because maybe in your case, I'm going to make an assumption, I have no idea, but maybe you're like, hey, this is going to be used in every school in America. I know, and it's big, the market is huge, they all need it, they have no way of managing this, etc. But and when I ask you, maybe, how are you going to do it? Oh, it's a product that has all these features, it's great. And, I'm just random, maybe not randomly, but I'm calling people. If instead you said, hey, I'm actually building this product, it's really good for schools that are, I'm making this up, by the way, Catholic schools that are only like kindergarten to 5th grade. And I know it's really good because of XYZ. So my first product actually handles this specific feature that, it really is going to allow me to go in there, right? And then as a pre-seed founder, you really just need to talk about that initial wedge as to how you're going to build that thing, right? It's easier to build a smaller prototype. There's always features you can throw out, and sometimes you throw out features just by figuring out who you're designing for, right? It's specifically on the deck. I recommend, if you have a couple screens of your product or pictures, that's great, but don't do a demo or product walkthrough or anything like that, because it doesn't really matter. It's more, you can do that later. It's more important to talk about, I put this little thing out and I have 5 or 1 school using it and they love it. That's what you want to hear at that pre-seed stage.
Okay. Thank you.
It's funny. I wanted to throw in your thing about you have a PhD and you're spending all day working on decks.
Yes.
It's funny because it really shows how important it is to tell a story and to convince people like how valuable that is.
Yes.
So much leverage. It's like, that's what it means to have like power or whatever, right? Like you're a celebrity. If you can make a good deck, it's like being Tom Cruise.
It actually helps a lot early on in the seed stage. Pre-seed is all about telling your story. So you have to over-index for being a great storyteller. And like Ho said, some people are just so good at it naturally. They don't have to work too hard at it. And they're able to raise money for bad companies, which is terrible because it comes to get them 5 years later or 10 years later, whatever. But you can learn. The good news is anybody can learn to be a great presenter and put decks together and so on. I always tell our founders to invest in themselves. I had a founder that took a lot of coaching for voice. And she said she spent a fortune, but if you hear her present, you're like, wow, she looks like a TV presenter. She looks great. And I think it helped her at the end, Anyway, so you have to invest in what you're not super good at. Assuming you're not super good at it, you may be great at it naturally.
Yeah, it's always hard you want to focus on what you're good at because it's fun and easy.
Easy.
Yeah. I'll just ignore the other stuff. Everything's like a nail.
I think somebody mentioned I think Ho said that you have, or sorry, I can't remember. You have to hire when you're starting a company. It's really hard to be a solo founder that has everything you need to be successful, right? Most of the times you actually need other people, and it's important. I call a founder whether they have a minimum viable team, meaning do they have a set of initial 2 or 3 people that complement each other and that are maybe one of them is really good at product and another one is really good at talking to customers and another one is a good ops person, because that's what makes companies really work, when there's this kind of really clear what people are doing. There's a lot of trust in the founding team. So yeah, definitely very important, Josh.
I like that. Yeah. Minimum viable product, minimum viable team, minimum viable market.
Yes. It's all about minimums of 0 to 1.
Keep those bars low.
Yes. Or do more with less.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask a question on the team issue. Way back in the old days, like 2017, when we would get visitors to the campus from VC firms and whatever, they would stress the team, right? They would say things like better an A team and a C product than the other way around. They would say things like that. And I guess, of course, that's always true to some extent. And probably the team or your sense of being able to judge them is a little bit less when you're in very early stage because they're so young and inexperienced. But, frankly, when you look at them, kind of what goes on in your mind when you're looking at them as personalities individually and groups of people trying to work together as a team, what role does that play in your judgment of them?
Yeah, good question, Gary. Great question. It's actually, the reason venture is so great because it's so, it's hard to codify. You would need to take a psychological test of all the founders and analyze their work history. And then maybe you would have enough variables to identify what makes a good founder. So I think people in venture that have been at it for a long time, they grow or they develop this taste or this way of detecting what makes a good team or a good founder. It's really hard, to be honest, and we make mistakes all the time, right? It's not an easy thing. I would say that, I've changed in my 7 years in venture. I've changed a little bit how I evaluate a company. I used to be very heavy on just team. And, you know, the rationale behind that is that it doesn't matter. A good team figures out the market, a good team figures out the product. Doesn't matter. That's definitely a good, you know, I don't know, a good hypothesis. But you know, things move so fast that I realize that it's not enough to be a great team. And I'll define what great means, but it's important to be in the right market, right? You could be a great team in the wrong market. And no matter how amazing you are, how hard you work, everything, it's you can't make progress, right? You don't raise money, or it's really hard to get sales or whatnot. So it's actually really critical as a founder, really, really critical, even at pre-seed, to pick the right market, you know, markets that are growing and that are, you know, where customers, you know, have access to capital to buy your product, et cetera. So that's become more important, market, and how, and what I think Sequoia calls it, I don't know if it's Sequoia or somebody else, but founder market fit. You want the founder to have some sort of correlation to the market they're in, right? So if I'm going to build software tools for, I don't know, the oil and gas industry, and I don't know anything about oil and gas, it's just going to be harder for me to be great at it. I'm going to have to learn more, or I have the risk of finding somebody I know something about it, right? So there's definitely that founder market fit for me is really important, right? I have backed many companies that pivot, okay? So I expect that 30% of my companies will actually change what they do. But that's part of running a startup. It's just what it is there's some universal constant for that. What is important is that the founder knows when to pivot and where to pivot, right? And typically those people that are able to, with the first idea, explain why they're doing what they're doing and why they think it's a good idea and why is it a good market, and they prove themselves wrong, right? They're capable to do it again for the next pivot. So, so I look for that. I definitely look to understand how the founder is thinking about the company. How do they make their, you know, strategy, product team decisions, right? It's a little subtle, but it's actually, that's what I try to do. It takes more than one meeting, you know, it takes several times and a lot of time to talk to a founder to know exactly, you know, how they make decisions. But that's what I try to do. I think you know, a great team, you know, it's interesting because we talk about teams, but one of the things that I have observed in my companies and also in other companies is that even the very successful companies, they typically have one person that is the leader or the CEO, right? And they are peer leaders of those companies. You can name any successful company. You think of that one founder, even though there may be more founders around it, right? Like, you know, Facebook, for example, many, it's like that. So I really look for do they have a strong leader in that team that's going to pull them through the bad times? And that's really important. Is there respect among that team? Is there trust? Because I'm looking like not only do they have diversity of knowledge and roles and so on, but can they execute efficiently? And when the things get tough, will they respect each other and get through with it, right? That's what I'm trying to answer. As you can imagine, it's really hard to figure that out. I hope I'm getting better, but we'll see.
I think a good first pass, if you could, to figure out if it's a great team, is if they are in a good market.
Yes, actually, it's fairly correlated. It's fairly correlated. To be honest, it is fairly correlated. That's why I think any engineer, or I think this is also for the Claremont. Even if you're not an engineer, go and learn about the market. It's not hard, you know. It just takes time, but just go learn about it. Everybody, you know, it's not like people at Wall Street know a lot about markets and nobody else can learn. Everybody can learn.
Yeah. So if they're, it just says something about them. If they seem really great, but they've got such a really small idea or a really bad business, you know, you're like, but are you really that good if you can't come up with a good business that makes, you know, that's just the first one. But yeah, hopefully they can tell you their 3 bad ideas they had And
Yeah.
now they have this good idea.
Actually, if you're in venture, you look a lot. There's a great post that Mike Schuster down in LA wrote, which is we invest in lines, not in dots, meaning like, when you meet somebody, you don't invest just on the first meeting, it's how they behave through diligence. Or if you see them a year later and you say, wow, this person learned so much or did so much or whatever, that's great. You really, as an investor, you are investing not in what something looks today, but what it will look tomorrow. So it's all about derivatives and the slope of that line, right? So, and that's what we're trying to do, predict what's going to be the slope of that line.
Yeah, you actually want to be closer to zero if the slope is
exactly.
Yes. Progress. I just want to know that it's going to be progress. Yeah. Quick, crazy, fast progress.
So I have a quick question. So you mentioned that investors look for tomorrow. So based on look at tomorrow, but based on your experience, how far into the future do you look into? How do you have, let's say, 5 years, 10 years,
That's
maybe
a good
20
question. That's a good question. It's hard, when I invest in a company, I'll tell you my personal story and I'll get to your question, but I graduated in 1999. I was a female PhD. And at the time, it was really like, well, you're going to hire a CEO for this poor female scientist who doesn't know anything about business. Luckily, this has changed, since a firm called Andreessen Horowitz came into the Valley. That perception changed. And now I think more and more people believe that it's better to bet on somebody, not bet, it's hard to do bets, but to back somebody that we believe is capable of growing into being a CEO, right? And it's really hard if you've never run a company of 10,000 people. How do I know if you, Gene, or in my window, John or Josh would be the person that can run a 10,000 person company? And, it's really hard. So I have to believe you could, but what I'm going to be looking at is okay, can this person get us to the next step at least, right? And if I'm investing in seed, I really want to believe that this person can get us at least to the Series A, right? And there's, like I said in the bigger meeting, there's many ways, but there's little things people do that tell you what type of leader they are or founder they are. Who they have hired into their team. How do they talk about their failures in the diligence process? Do they have data? Do they have anything about their company? How do they present stuff? We're looking at everything, and I'm trying from even the smallest interactions to predict, what's going to happen. I think Josh mentioned we invested in this company from HMC called Young Alfred. These guys have the fastest turnaround time on any question. So if you send an email, saying, hey, to founders at Pear, these guys are always the first to respond. And when you would ask anything during the diligence, you would have your answer the next day. I think they probably didn't sleep working on it. But that's a sign of what somebody's going to do, right? That's a sign. So yeah, I'm looking for those little tiny signals. And I have to be almost super convinced this person gets the company to the next stage. I'm somewhat convinced it's the person that will run a public company. And I would say for anybody that wants to be the CEO of a public company, and hasn't been before, you really need to invest in yourself. So you have to grow and keep learning. Our best CEOs are always reading. They are always learning. We have a list of books for people because there's so many CEO readers, but it's because they really want to learn, right? And get better, and every stage slightly different, so.
Yeah, I'd say, just like tech support, being fast is better than being good. You just, you're right. You just get more done. You mess up.
But you're there.
But then you got it. You did it 10 times, but you got it. And you probably get it done. You get the right answer faster than somebody who's going regular speed and, and a little smarter or whatever. It's
yes.
It compounds just like everything,
I'll tell you something. I think sometimes when I talk my founders that have B2B companies and they go sell, I'm always like, okay, you have to imagine you are the customer, right? What do they care about? What is the problem they have? So you can tailor the pitch to that customer. That's why it's really important in a sales process that you spend the first few minutes, maybe if you can do it, the first 15 minutes asking them questions, because then you can tell the story better, right? So I think it's important when you go fundraise and you talk to an angel or you talk to a fund that it's like mine, Seed, or a fund that is, multi-stage fund like Syracuse or Hove, then it's, okay, what are these people, what are they looking for? Okay, if I don't have anything, how are they going to evaluate me, right? How would I evaluate myself if I don't yet have a customer or a product? It's all common sense. We don't have like this secret evaluation thing. We're really just trying to understand whether that person can pull it off, basically.
And it's really hard to even, you're usually so excited to like even practicing or running it over in your mind or whatever. You just want to, here's my pitch, or whatever, or here's my sales pitch. And you just, they probably want to talk about themselves too. So
yes, it's really hard and people are really nervous and I feel so bad. So hard to be a founder fundraising. I've been in that job and there's a lot of rejection. So you go see, I think the average is you see 30 people and you get a term sheet, then you're doing great. Mm-hmm. But, it's not for the faint of heart, because if you get no's, 28 times in a row or 29, you're just like, forget it. I'm not going to do it. Right.
But that means the next one's a yes. If you've done it,
yes, statistically,
and you'll get excited as you get to number 30. You're like, here it comes.
Yes, it's hard. It's really hard, I would say. I think the good news about fundraising is if you're talking to good people, they will give you feedback, right? Because I think I will at least want to help everybody that comes my way. So I will try to be as honest as possible and do something that could help them, right? And I think most people in my job want to be good to the founders and do that. So you should, if somebody says no, follow up and say, thank you so much. It would really help me, or you would really help me. Make sure you use that sentence if you gave me some feedback as to what I need to work on. And, when you do that, you get 10 no's, but you get 10 answers like that. You're going to learn a lot. You're going to be in a much better position for the next 10 or the next 10 meetings, right? It's really important.
I have a question about pitching the idea. How this kind of has to also do with legal, but how, as a founder or as somebody who's pitching a product idea, how careful do you have to be around VCs with maybe some of the more like intellectual property type stuff when pitching an idea?
Okay. Well, I guess it really depends on who you're pitching. I think if you're pitching any like good firm, we take it super seriously. Like first of all, I'm not gonna ask any IP question in the first meeting. I'm just asking, okay, if the product that you're building works, will it be a big company? That's all I'm trying to figure out, right? And if I get to the point where like, okay, I believe that's a big market and that's the right product, then I will try to understand, okay, do they have vaporware or do they have something, right? And then at that point I'll get involved, right? I think you probably know that VCs don't sign NDAs, and honestly that predates me. There's some history about it, but it's very important for me. There's a lot of people with money, right? The only thing that differentiates me from another investor is, my strategy, but also like my integrity and my character, right? So if I do anything that is not kosher, I might as well be out of business, right? So it's very important for me that I don't have a conflict with a company or anything. I think first-time founders, not second-time founders, but first-time founders are overly careful about revealing their IP or their strategy, super careful. And most of the time it hurts them rather than it gets them something, because no VC is gonna go out there and build your company or call somebody and be like, hey, I found some great IP. Why don't you start a company based on that IP that I just found out from this founder. I mean, it would be crazy for us to do that, right? Possible, but completely crazy. So, but if you hide your value, then you're hurting yourself, right? Because nobody can get excited about what you're building, right? And again, remember, you don't have to do that in the first couple of meetings. You just have to show that you're going, if what you're working on works, then you'll make a lot of money. That's all you want to know.
Remember, these are all people that have more money than time. So if you give them the option of like, I have this great thing that I want to build that you like, do you want to steal it and work on it yourself? Or do you just give me
no way.
Just give me the money? And it's like you're doing it, you're getting a piece of it, and you don't have to do any work. It doesn't take any.
And by the way, most times people will think they're the only people in the universe that could do this. I'm like, okay, not true. You know, there's always some other way of doing something, right? So it's not about the idea. It's not about the IP. It's about, in very rare occasions, you know, I have a couple of companies in biotech where patents are really important and so on. But in most cases, vast majority of the cases, it's all about execution. How quickly, you know, can you really go ahead and, you know, do everything it takes to pull this product or IP through?
Actually, I have a question.
Hi, Dan.
Hi.
Oh, Anthony, sorry, you're on top of Dan. I thought it was Dan.
Oh, sorry.
I'll be next.
Okay. So over the past few months, have you actually seen any progress being made with regards to more opportunities being available for, you know, founders of color and more specifically Black founders? Because there has been pretty, yeah. And then I also have a second question as well. I'm 20 and the rest of the founders on my team are 20. We're all still in college. And so is our age more of an asset or a liability, do you think?
Okay, your case is an asset, so you're good, the 20. There's more bias towards funding people that are 20 than people that are 50. So if you had to choose an age for low bias, 20 is better, just so you know. Okay. Yeah, there's definitely been, you know, I think BLN has been like a huge thing in our community. I think maybe 3 years ago started our venture industry started to shake up a little bit with all the Me Too movement. So we've, you know, me and 30 other people and me started this group called All Raise for female investors, are kind of a force of nature, and it has, you know, helped a lot of women, female founders, et cetera. I started another conference for women in venture that want to raise funds. So there's been a lot done in the last few years on the female side, but it's taken a while. You know, these big initiatives can't get done in 2 weeks, right? I see the same happening in Black founders community. Black VC has a lot of activities. I think, you know, my husband's also in venture, has been mentoring a few Black students in HBC colleges, which it's great. I did a whole month of like, if you're a Black founder, I'll take a meeting. So there's a lot of activities happening. I expect that within the next 1 or 2 years, it will be more formalized, but there's definitely a reception there. I would tell you though, that the numbers are so awful. They're like so bad, right? Like I think, you know, in venture, 2% of the money is managed by women. And I think under 0.5% is managed by, or worse, it's like some really tiny number by Black investors. So you can imagine the amount of work we need to do to get to parity, right? It's huge. So when I say it's getting better, we may go from 2 to 3, but we got a long way to go to get to 50, right? So same with, you know, Black founders. The good news is that more funds are aware of it. At least, you know, most of my friends are aware of it, and people are trying hard. For example, if I have a meeting with an underrepresented minority and we decide not to do it, I'll try to give them another chance because I think it's harder for them. And, you know, we'll try. We're being very active. I like I said, I teach a class. We're being very active trying to recruit. The first time I taught the class was like 20% female. And now we're at 50%. We're trying to get more Black founders, and this year we'll see. Hopefully, we'll succeed. Yeah, but it's getting better, Anthony, and I think you'll be okay.
Next.
Okay, Dan.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for your time today. I will be 50 in June, so I guess I got to act fast here. And for my Amazon comment, it's you just have to read the news about Amazon, the way they work with startups. So they will take your idea, allegedly.
Yeah.
So my question to you though is, you can obviously estimate. I'm not looking for like a 0.5% error here, but like how often have you gotten it wrong, so to speak? Like, I guess I should. And then, but then, well, what can you teach us about, you know, like, because doubtless we will be in a circumstance where we're like, you should have invested in me. So how can we see that coming and adjust what we're doing to work with you? Or
Yes. Okay, so yeah. So
what can we learn from your learnings?
And there are two types of mistakes. One, which most people ask me about, is when you invest in a company that goes down to zero. And that's okay. It's our business. You expect it that most companies will not make it, right? The big mistake is when you pass on a company that ends up being 1,000 or 1 million, whatever. And that really is very painful because it's the difference between you returning the fund or not, right? Most of the times we've passed on good companies, and we have, is because we're focused on the wrong things, like valuation, competition, traction, always related to valuation. It was never about the team, or like it was never about like, wow, this is a class 1 team, and it was never about the market. It was just we make decisions based on the wrong things. So we do this horrible postmortems where you want to cry, but it's really important to do those, right? And now I think I'm really not. I don't care about any of those things where we've made errors before.
So now, if I was pitching you, and you said no, but I could kind of get a sense that would it be fair for me to ask, how can I get to that yes? Like,
yeah, you absolutely. Yeah, you should. You should ask. You should absolutely ask.
Fair enough. Thank you.
That is a good point about the, like, because now, I don't know, I've done like 200 companies, and I probably couldn't name the 90 that have failed. And I could tell you that, like, I missed out on Twilio, and, and I missed out on Coinbase, and like that's what really sticks with you.
Yes.
Yeah, where you're like, why didn't I just invest in everything? Why am I being so pound foolish? So penny wise on these.
There's an entire city called Las Vegas where I live, built on that very premise. So come on over and spend some money.
Yeah, right. I like to bet on all the roulette numbers.
That's right. We even got 000 now, so you're all set.
Yeah.
Awesome. Josh, I have to run to my 2:45.
Well, yeah, no
But
problem.
anyways, I think you know how to get in touch with me if anybody needs anything.
Yep, you can get in touch with me if you don't know how to get in touch with her, and I will make it happen.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good luck to everybody. I'm sure you guys are building good things. So
yeah.
Thank you, Brooke. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet everybody.
Yeah.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye. I guess I'll close this room out. Let me see. The other rooms are already gone. Someone's in the shower. Like Devin there, taking a shower. It's efficient. Oh yeah, the other one's already closed. I'll close the whole thing. Woo! Have a good weekend, everybody. Let's stop recording. Oh, it's just popping in just as